Yuji is going to transform into Sukuna because their ties are actually deeper than just being twin brothers from the Heian era, with Yuji potentially being Yamato Takeru, who is also originally known as Prince Osu, who's actually the one to slay his twin brother, which may have been Sukuna. We're discussing who potentially Yuji and Sukuna's father is. Could it be Emperor Kiko, or could it be Emperor Chuai, as either answer actually has some insane implications for the story of Jujutsu Kaisen. And of course, there are some crazy theories in regards to the Shinbutsu mummy, which potentially really could be Sukuna's brother, with the transformation actually having been forced upon him by Sukuna himself. As you can hear, there are a bunch of wild theories to talk about, and a lot I'm very excited to talk about. So trust me, if you're a Yuji or a Sukuna fan, you're definitely going to want to watch this one all the way until the end. And hey, leave a like, it helps out a ton. And of course, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content. I got a ton of crazy theory videos, power scaling videos, analysis, spoiler videos on chapters when they come out, because less than 10% of people who actually watch my videos are subscribed. So believe me, if you love JJK, you will not regret subscribing. And of course, thank you to the special members of the channel, it is much appreciated. Alright, now it is actually time to get into all the theories. So the first thing I'm going to start with is actually the Shinbutsu mummy. Now in the past, I've made a ton of theories on what this could be, right? Could it be a clone of Sukuna that Tengen had actually made to try and progress themselves into evolving past humanity? Maybe it could have been some experiments that Tengen and Kenjaku may have done. Maybe it's the corpse of Sukuna, but really, I like this theory that I thought of recently that maybe it actually just is Sukuna's twin brother. Now, a lot of people think it probably isn't, specifically because it was Sukuna that ascended past humanity. There's no reason why his twin should have the exact same body as him, because we see that the corpse of the Shinbutsu mummy has the exact same skull and facial structure as Sukuna. They got the 4 eyes, and not only do they have the 4 eyes, but specifically it is exactly like Sukuna's, how 2 of those ugly ass eyes are in a very weird position. Now, the first reason why I actually think that this could potentially be Yuji's brother is specifically because of the lore around why monks had actually become Shinbutsu mummies, or why this ritual was actually performed. And also, I'll be sourcing every single bit of information I've got in this video into the description if you're curious. So to actually quote the source, Sokushinbutsu are a kind of Buddhist mummy. In Japan, the term refers to the practice of Buddhist monks observing asceticism to the point of death and entering mummification while they're alive. I'm definitely not going to show the pictures on screen because I don't even think I can. YouTube might clap this video if I do, but it truly is monks just leaving themselves to die and meditating while they die, and they actually mummify while they're alive, I guess because of dehydration and lack of nutrition. It is pretty gruesome. And the reason we actually think that the Shinbutsu mummy that we saw in Jujutsu Kaisen, well, is a Shinbutsu mummy is because Sukuna outright says, oh, this Shinbutsu mummy. The reason a lot of you may have not actually known this is because, of course, classic The Viz, yet again, they made a poor translation like they have littered throughout all of Jujutsu Kaisen with mistranslations and incorrect translations. Specifically, it's page 3 of chapter 222. Sukuna just says, heh, mummification. Whereas in the actual Japanese, or so I'm told, he actually specifically says Shinbutsu mummy, not just mummification. So it's not like mummification is wrong, it's just ignoring a crucial bit of detail that's very important, because you have to question, why is it a Shinbutsu mummy? Because it's also wearing the same robes and cloaks that a monk may actually wear while they're actually doing the Shinbutsu mummification. It's a very important question to ask. Had this just been a clone or Tengen's experiment, would there be any point of actually pushing it to the point of mummification? Maybe Tengen is actually trying to see if they are actually immortal, see how far you can actually push it, but the fact that it's a practice that Buddhist monks made, specifically they want to observe asceticism. Now, what is asceticism? As many of you may not actually know, as I'll be honest, I actually didn't know either. Asceticism is a lifestyle characterized by the abstinence from sensational pleasures, often for the purpose of pursuing spiritual goals. Now, it's pretty interesting, right? The exact wording that's used here. Sensational pleasures. You want to remove all of them. You want to purify yourself. You want to just become completely pure, as actually one of the reasons people do this is specifically to purify the body. It's to purify the soul. It's actually obtain a greater connection with the divine, or to find inner peace. Now, who does this sound like? Well, I hope your answer wasn't Sukuna, because that is the complete opposite of Ryomen Sukuna. Sukuna, he drowns in his pleasures. He lives for his pleasures. He even told Kashimo that's literally his whole reason for existing. It's for pleasure. Everything that happens should be to his pleasure. It should be to his liking. Now, that makes it even more interesting. This person who clearly has Sukuna's skull and body type and is really just looks like Sukuna's corpse was doing a ritual that is the complete opposite of Ryomen Sukuna. So that's why I hesitate to say that this actually is Ryomen Sukuna. Why would Sukuna be doing this Sokushinbutsu ritual to mummify himself, to remove himself of all pleasures? That's why I believe it's actually his twin brother. Now, why would his twin brother also be transformed? Well, actually, that goes into one of my theories. I actually do believe that since twins are treated as one, I think perhaps at the point when Sukuna had actually ascended past humanity and transformed, that may have actually affected his twin as well. So it's very likely that this twin, clearly they are a Buddhist monk since they did the whole Shinbutsu ritual, and then it would make sense why they're doing a Sokushinbutsu ritual. They're trying to purify themselves and cleanse themselves since they've just transformed into this ungodly creature. Maybe they were actually hoping that this would just cleanse them. When whoever Sukuna was as a human died and then he ascended past humanity, he evolved and now he became Ryomen Sukuna. Right now he's got that title and he's this four-armed freak of nature? Like I said before, because they are twins, what if that transformation was actually forced upon their twin, who may not have even been there at the time? They may have been just doing their own thing as a monk, and then they were just forced to transform randomly. Again, this is because twins are treated as one, so much so that even Maki's insanely powerful heavenly restriction was nerfed because Mai actually had cursed energy. Even though Maki herself didn't actually have cursed energy, because Mai had cursed energy, the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, or God, or whatever is actually deciding all these things, did actually count them as one, and because of that, technically it's like Maki had cursed energy even though she didn't have any cursed energy, and thus her binding vow was heavily nerfed. Granted, Maki could have grown stronger had Mai actually decided to train, and of course had Mai's cursed energy grown, but Maki's potential would forever have been stunted as long as Mai had been alive, because they're twins. They're connected that deeply that even the cursed energy of one, or the binding vow of one, even though they don't share the same body, there are ramifications from just one of them being alive. So that's why I think maybe if Sukuna were to transform and he did have a twin, which I do think he did, and I'm going to touch on so many theories regarding that and who he could have been and who Yuji could have been, maybe that transformation was actually forced upon Sukuna himself. Now, the question then arises, why isn't Yuji currently transformed? And especially since Sukuna just incarnated into its true body, shouldn't Yuji in that case just have also transformed in that moment? This is going to be a bit of a cop-out answer, I do understand, but I think there are actually exceptional circumstances with Yuji right now, because it does seem like he's not an incarnation of whoever he was in the past, but rather a reincarnation. Again, that's just theoretical, I can't actually confirm that. So it's possible that given these circumstances, or maybe because Yuji actually doesn't have access to his Heian techniques, or his Heian memories, or any of his Heian soul's information, maybe because of that, he's not being affected by Sukuna because of that. It's unclear. I could really just spew out a bunch of theories on why it's not affecting Yuji, but until we actually just learn what Yuji is, what his real connection is with Sukuna, we won't actually know. Once we find that out, then at that point, we will definitely find the answer as to why Yuji and Sukuna aren't being affected, even though they probably, very likely, would have been twin brothers in the past. Again, maybe it's just because it's a reincarnation and that tie would have been severed, but I still think they actually have a deep connection. And now, this goes into the whole title of the video, why I actually think Yuji will transform and become Sukuna. I think that if Yuji is able to access his Heian era information via his soul, very likely it could be Ino who revives him, or Choso, since Ino's curse technique very easily could actually pull any information that's inside of Yuji's soul, so even if he's a reincarnation, it could actually awaken those memories, and if he does awaken, it might actually transform Yuji into the same type of body that Sukuna has. It might forcefully ascend Yuji. And if you're curious, I made a whole video on why I actually think Yuji will die a third time, and he will resurrect with all of his Heian powers. And now to get into the second part of the video, specifically all of the Heian lore and potentially who they could have been, because I've touched on this so much. Again, I've made so many theory videos on Yuji being a prince, Sukuna being a royal prince, and this is just another one of those type of theories. I just love it so much. Now, specifically, it's actually possible that Yuji is Yamato Takekuru, and his original name was Prince Osu, if I'm saying it correctly, and he was actually the son of Emperor Keiko, or Kiko, however you say that. I hope I'm not mispronouncing it. And of course, they were part of the Yamato dynasty. It's important because this prince was specifically mentioned in the Nihon Shoki Chronicles of Japan storybook, which is a very old Japanese book, which is specifically where GEGE has quoted to actually have gotten Ryoma Sukuna from, and where he's actually based him off of. So that's why this book is very important. GEGE has read this book, and it's where he got his main villain from. So characters that do appear from this book could potentially still appear in Jujutsu Kaisen, as Ryoma Sukuna has. Now, it really is interesting to think if Yuji actually is Prince Takekuru, since Takekuru did slay his older brother, and I do have that whole theory where Yuji was actually the one to have originally killed Sukuna in the past. There's a lot of evidence tying to it, and it would actually explain why Sukuna hates Yuji so much, but so much so that when this prince actually slew him, the Emperor Kiko, their father, just feared his brutal temperament, and it does actually match with Yuji. How Yuji can get angry at times, but not exactly, since Yuji can be quite sweet too. So it's possible that perhaps Prince Takekuru is actually Sukuna and not Yuji, and Sukuna had actually killed his twin brother. Now, we do actually know some Sukuna lore, since Sukuna himself said he was an unwanted and wretched child, which very likely is hinting at the fact that Sukuna may have been actually born disfigured, and that's why he was unwanted, or it could have been because he was a twin, so both of the twins were unwanted and wretched, because as we know in JJK, twins are a bad omen. Normally, when sorcerers actually have twins, they actually kill them. Maki and Mai even being alive is a unique exception. It further goes on to say that Kiko, the emperor, had actually sent Yamato Takekuru, so this is the prince who actually slayed his brother, throughout the lands to kill people who disobeyed the imperial court. Now, this really does tie into one of my theories that potentially Yuji may have been the general that killed Sukuna, specifically Takefuru Kume no Mikoto. But what if he's actually not Takefuru Kume no Mikoto, and that was just a separate general that existed in the imperial court, and maybe Yuji is actually Yamato Takekuru, and perhaps Yamate Takekuru, who is Yuji, and Takefuru Kume no Mikoto, who's a separate general who actually in the Nihon Shoki, again, which is what GEGE had actually read and based Sukuna off of, this was the general who actually defeated Sukuna and drove him out of the Hida province. I still prefer if Yuji was actually Takefuru Kume no Mikoto. That's probably my theory. Another interesting theory, again, all sources in the description, it states that Sukuna and Yuji may actually be the children children of the Emperor Chuai. Now, if you're someone who watches this channel regularly, this name should be familiar as I've mentioned him in past videos, as he was an emperor who wasn't around during the Heian era, but you know GEGE, he may possibly just shift the dates around to make it match, so maybe he was the emperor of the Heian era. But specifically, this emperor is very interesting since he's actually killed by a vengeful spirit, specifically called Kami or just God. And of course, I've theorized that this is actually Sukuna, so not only is Sukuna one of his sons, but specifically when Sukuna had actually ascended, then he had actually gone to kill the emperor. So maybe the emperor had actually sent out his generals. Could have been the two people that I mentioned before, or it could have just been Takefuru Kumi no Mikoto, which matches the Nihon Shoki Chronicles in Japan. And when the human Sukuna actually died, but then ascended and became a vengeful spirit, he proceeded to not just kill the general, but then also kill the emperor himself, which would match the actual mythology and the legendary narrative and everything behind it. Now, Emperor Chuai specifically had two sons. One of them is actually called Kagosaki no Miko, and the other one is called Oshikuma no Miko, and both brothers are actually very deeply related to the Mina and Hida provinces. The reason this is important is because the Hida province is specifically the area that Sukuna actually ruled over during the Heian era. It is a pretty integral part of the Sukuna lore that's mentioned not just in the Nihon Shoki Chronicles, but often throughout whenever Ryomen Sukuna does exist. And in case you are curious, the current Gifu prefecture is actually the Hida province. That's just what it was called back in the day. But it does make it more likely since both of these brothers were actually related to the Hida province. Again, it's Sukuna's area, and it's also considered that Ryomen Sukuna had a Hida-based dynasty the same size as the Yamato dynasty. And that is very impressive because the Yamato dynasty had actually ruled over Japan throughout centuries through many different eras. I do believe that they may have actually been the ones who were ruling over Japan during the Heian era, specifically because the Yamato dynasty were actually enemies of Ryomen Sukuna. They really had it out for him, which would make a lot more sense if Sukuna was a disgraced prince. That would explain the incredible animosity between the two groups, but it would be pretty cool if Sukuna actually had a force as strong as them, or at least ruled over an area as big as theirs. But that is all for the video. If you did enjoy watching, be sure to leave a like, it helps out a ton. Thank you. And of course, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content. Like I said in the intro, over 90% of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed. So if you want to see a ton of crazy theory videos like this one, power scaling videos, analysis, spoiler videos on chapters when they come out, trust me, I would recommend subscribing. If you love JJK, you will not regret it. And of course, thank you to all the channel members as well. It is much appreciated. If you've watched this far, you remember the Higuruma fan club. Thank you very much. And that's all. Take care and have a nice day.